Marcus Johnson stood on the freshly swept driveway of 1422 Sycamore Lane, keys dangling from his fingers, taking in the red-bricked colonial he now called home. The late April breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass and cherry blossoms, a welcome change from the staleness of his downtown apartment. After 3 years of 60-hour work weeks at Oracle, developing cloud security protocols that earned him both a senior developer position and a salary that made this move possible, he finally had a place with actual trees outside his window. "Last box, Mr. Johnson," called the mover, a stocky man with forearms like small tree trunks. "Thanks, Pete. And please, it's Marcus." He smiled, signing the delivery form and adding a generous tip. "I appreciate you guys working on a Sunday." The moving truck pulled away, leaving Marcus alone with his new life spread out in labeled boxes across hardwood floors that needed refinishing, but had character. Exactly what the realtor had promised. The house wasn't perfect, but it had potential. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a backyard with enough space for summer cookouts, and most importantly, distance from the constant hum of downtown traffic. Marcus opened the French doors leading to the backyard. The grass needed cutting, and the flower beds showed signs of neglect from the previous owners, but he could already envision summer evenings out here. Maybe he'd get a grill. His mother would love that. She'd been telling him for years that a man his age should know how to properly barbecue a rack of ribs. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister Aisha. "Settled in yet? Mom's already planning your housewarming party." Marcus chuckled, typing back, "Tell her to hold off until I at least have a couch assembled. Miss you guys." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked the perimeter of his yard, mentally cataloging projects. The fence needed staining. The cherry tree could use pruning. The shed in the corner would make a perfect home office once cleaned out. A movement caught his eye. Curtains fluttering in the window of the house to his right. For a brief moment he glimpsed a woman's face, middle-aged and pinched with something that might have been curiosity or concern before the curtain fell back into place. "Probably should introduce myself to the neighbors," Marcus murmured to himself, making a mental note for tomorrow. First impressions mattered in places like Oakwood Heights. The realtor had emphasized the close-knit community aspect during the showing, a phrase Marcus had learned could mean anything from genuinely friendly to intensely nosy. Back inside, Marcus unpacked his kitchen essentials, coffee maker first, a priority born from years of caffeine-fueled coding sessions. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every few minutes he'd glance toward the windows, catching nothing but his own reflection in the glass. At dusk, after assembling his bed frame and unpacking enough clothes for the work week, Marcus walked out to collect his mail for the first time. The neighborhood had gone quiet, porch lights flickering on one by one. His mailbox, a black metal standard issue with 1422 in gold lettering, stood at the end of his driveway alongside his neighbor's. As he reached for the small door, a voice startled him. "The mailman doesn't come on Sundays." Marcus turned to find a woman standing at the edge of his property line. She was perhaps in her early 60s with carefully colored blonde hair set in rigid layers, wearing khaki capris and a polo shirt with the Oakwood Heights HOA logo embroidered on the breast pocket. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. In the fading light, "Oh, I know," Marcus said, offering a friendly smile. "Just getting a feel for everything. I'm Marcus Johnson. Just moved in today." The woman didn't return his smile. Her eyes moved from Marcus to the house and back again, lingering a beat too long on his Oracle Company t-shirt, now stained with sweat from hours of unpacking. "I'm Diane Keller. I live next door," she finally said, gesturing to the house whose curtains had fluttered earlier. "I'm also treasurer of the Homeowners Association." "Nice to meet you." Marcus extended his hand. Diane hesitated fractionally before taking it, her grip loose and brief. "You should know the HOA has strict regulations about lawn maintenance. The previous owners let things slip." Marcus nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite the unexpected welcome. "I noticed. I'm planning to tackle the yard next weekend. Our bylaws require lawns to be maintained weekly during growing season. Grass cannot exceed 3 inches. Her tone suggested recitation rather than conversation. I'll keep that in mind. I'm actually looking forward to some yard work after being in an apartment so long. Diane's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you renting, Mr. Johnson? The question hung in the air, its implication obvious enough that Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest. The same sensation he'd experienced in high-end stores when security followed him a little too closely, or when dates suggested meeting at restaurants where he would feel comfortable. No, Mrs. Keller, I purchased the home. His voice remained even, professional, the same tone he used in meetings when someone suggested his ideas were surprisingly articulate. I see. Diane's gaze drifted to his car in the driveway, a 2-year-old Tesla Model 3, modest by the neighborhood's standards but hardly a clunker. Well, welcome to Oakwood Heights. You'll want to read the HOA covenant carefully. We take community standards very seriously here. I'm sure I'll get the hang of things, Marcus replied, determined to end the interaction on a positive note. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone else soon. Indeed. Diane turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and the trash bins should be kept out of street view except on collection days. Tuesdays in this section. With that, she walked back toward her house, leaving Marcus alone with his empty mailbox and the distinct impression that Oakwood Heights might not be quite the peaceful retreat he'd envisioned. Inside, he poured himself a glass of whiskey, Maker's Mark, a housewarming gift to himself, and brought up the HOA covenant on his laptop. 97 pages of rules, restrictions, and regulations. He began reading, highlighter in hand, a habit from his law school days before the tech industry had lured him away with promises of innovation and considerably less student loan debt. By midnight, Marcus had a good understanding of what he was dealing with. Between the lines of proper fence heights and approved exterior paint colors lay the blueprint of a neighborhood determined to maintain not just property values, but a very specific vision of community, one he suspected Diane Keller had strong opinions about. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Aisha. Forgot to ask, how are the neighbors? Marcus stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, jury's still out. The first week passed in a blur of cardboard boxes and Zoom meetings. Marcus had negotiated a remote work arrangement for his first 2 weeks at Oakwood Heights, allowing him to settle in while keeping up with Oracle's demanding development schedule. By Friday afternoon, his home office had taken shape in the second bedroom. Dual monitors arranged beside a window overlooking the backyard, ergonomic chair positioned to catch natural light, and a small fiddle-leaf fig his mother had insisted would breathe life into the space. The rest of the house remained a work in progress. Living room furniture would arrive tomorrow, kitchen essentials were unpacked but haphazardly arranged, and the master bedroom still had moving boxes stacked, like urban architecture against one wall. But it was coming together, slowly transforming from house to home. Marcus stretched, closing his laptop after submitting the week's security protocol updates. Outside, the neighborhood hummed with Friday energy. Children released from school, weekend lawn care beginning in earnest. Cars pulling into driveways earlier than on weekdays. He decided a walk would clear his head and help him get to know his surroundings better. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Oakwood Heights as Marcus made his way down Sycamore Lane. The neighborhood was picturesque in a way that seemed almost deliberate. Each lawn manicured with precision, flower beds arranged in complementary color schemes, mailboxes uniform in height and style. American flags adorned several porches, gently billowing in the spring breeze. A woman pushing a stroller offered a tentative smile as they passed. Marcus nodded in return. Beautiful day, he offered. Yes, lovely, she replied, her pace quickening slightly. Marcus continued his walk, noting similar brief interactions with other residents, polite but distant, curious but reserved. He'd experienced this particular brand of caution before, the careful assessment of whether he belonged in spaces like this. He'd learned to move through it with patient persistence, knowing that familiarity often, though not always, eased initial wariness. As he rounded the corner back onto his street, he noticed a small group gathered near his property. Diane Keller, stood with two other women, gesturing toward his lawn. Marcus slowed his approach, observing the animated conversation that halted abruptly when one of the women spotted him. "Afternoon, ladies," he called, keeping his tone light and approachable. Diane turned, her smile tightening into something closer to a grimace. "Mr. Johnson, we were just discussing the neighborhood spring beautification initiative." "Sounds interesting," Marcus replied, stopping at the edge of his driveway. "I'm actually planning to work on my yard this weekend." "This is Sandra Miller, head of the beautification committee," Diane said, indicating a tall woman with silver-streaked auburn hair, and Linda Archer, who organizes our community events. Both women murmured hellos, Sandra's gaze critical as it swept over Marcus's untamed lawn. "Your grass is nearly 4 inches in some spots," Sandra noted, her tone suggesting she was conferring a favor by pointing this out. "The covenant stipulates 3 inches maximum." Marcus nodded, maintaining his professional smile. "I've got the landscaper coming tomorrow morning, actually. They'll be handling regular maintenance going forward." "Oh?" Diane's eyebrows raised. "Which company?" "We maintain a list of approved vendors." "Green Horizons Landscaping," Marcus replied. "They came recommended by my realtor." The 3 women exchanged glances. Linda cleared her throat. "They're not on our preferred list. We've had issues with their attention to detail in the past." "I'm sorry to hear that," Marcus said. "I've already signed a 3-month contract with them, but I'll certainly keep an eye on their work. If there are any problems, I'll reconsider." Diane's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, I suppose we'll see. The Welcome Committee meeting is next Thursday evening at the community center, by the way, 7 o'clock. You might find it informative." "I'll try to make it," Marcus said, though he had no intention of rearranging his schedule for what was clearly Diane's attempt to further acquaint him with HOA regulations. "Have a good weekend, ladies." Inside his house, Marcus poured himself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window, watching as the women lingered for several more minutes. Before dispersing, Diane cast one last look toward his house before returning to her own property. His phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. "Hi, Marcus. This is James from 3 doors down, 1428. Saw you talking with the HOA Dragons. You survived. Want to grab a beer sometime? Promise we're not all like that." Marcus smiled, sending back, "Beer sounds great. I'm free Sunday afternoon if that works." Perhaps there was hope for community after all. Saturday morning arrived with the rumble of lawn equipment. Marcus sipped coffee on his front porch, watching as the Green Horizons crew transformed his neglected yard. By noon, the lawn was immaculate. Grass cut to precisely 2.75 inches, edges trimmed with military precision, flower beds weeded and mulched with fresh cedar chips. "All set, Mr. Johnson," said Carlos, the crew leader, presenting a tablet for signature. "We'll be back next Saturday, same time. Will that work for you?" "Perfect," Marcus replied, adding a tip to the invoice. "Any chance you could help me with something else? I'd like to plant some vegetables in the backyard, maybe set up some raised beds." Carlos hesitated. "You might want to check your HOA rules. First, some of these fancy neighborhoods have restrictions about vegetable gardens, especially if they're visible from the street." Marcus frowned. "Really? It's just some tomatoes and peppers." "Trust me," Carlos said, lowering his voice. "We've had to tear out gardens before because someone complained. These HOAs can be intense." After the landscapers left, Marcus returned to his covenant documents, flipping through until he found the relevant section. Sure enough, under exterior modifications and garden structures, a subsection clearly stated, "Vegetable gardens are restricted to rear yards only and must not exceed 100 square feet. Structures supporting vegetable growth, cages, stakes, trellises, must not exceed 4 feet in height and must not be visible from any street or common area." "Ridiculous," Marcus muttered, but made a note to ensure his garden plans complied. Picking his battles would be essential to peaceful living here. The furniture delivery arrived that afternoon. A charcoal gray sectional sofa, glass coffee table, and entertainment center for the living room, plus bar stools for the kitchen island. By evening, The house had transformed into something that resembled the vision Marcus had held when signing the mortgage papers. He was arranging books on a shelf when a sharp knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Outside stood a man roughly his age, holding a six-pack of local craft beer. "James Parker," the man said, extending his free hand. "I texted yesterday. Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Marcus replied, shaking James's hand and stepping back to invite him in. "Just getting organized." James was a high school history teacher who had moved to Oakwood Heights 3 years earlier with his wife, a pediatric nurse. As they settled onto the new sofa with beers in hand, he offered the neighborhood orientation that Marcus had been lacking. "Diane's been HOA treasurer for 6 years," James explained, leaning back against the cushions. "She ran unopposed the last 2 elections because nobody else wants the job. It gives her purpose, I think. Her husband left about 5 years ago, ran off with his administrative assistant. Classic midlife crisis stuff." "That explains some things," Marcus said, taking a sip of his beer. "Look," James continued, his expression growing serious, "I should probably warn you, Diane's had issues with some homeowners in the past. Particularly," he hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Particularly black homeowners?" Marcus finished for him. James nodded, relieved not to have to say it. "There was a family 2 streets over, the Washingtons. They moved out last year after constant harassment, citations for every little thing, complaints about their kid's basketball hoop, even called the police once when they had a family reunion because there were suspicious people gathering." Marcus absorbed this information silently, feeling a familiar weight settle in his stomach. He'd chosen Oakwood Heights for its good schools and increasing property values, knowing he might face some resistance but hoping the neighborhood had evolved beyond such pettiness. "I'm telling you this because some of us are getting tired of it," James continued. "There's a growing number of residents who want change, who moved here for the location and amenities, not to enforce some outdated idea of what a nice neighborhood looks like. But Diane's got a loyal faction, mostly older residents who've been here since the development was built." "I appreciate the heads up," Marcus said. "I'm not looking for trouble, but I'm also not going to be intimidated out of a house I worked hard to afford." James nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit. Just document everything. The HOA board meets monthly, and while Diane has influence, she doesn't have absolute power." When James left 2 hours later, Marcus felt marginally better about his new community. The conversation had reinforced something he'd learned early in life. Allies could be found in unexpected places, and facing challenges was easier when you weren't alone. Sunday passed quietly. Marcus finished unpacking, set up his entertainment system, and organized his kitchen according to the efficiency principles he applied to his coding projects. He noticed Diane watching from her window as he brought his trash bins to the curb, a day early according to regulations, but he'd be leaving for the office before dawn tomorrow and didn't want to forget. Within 10 minutes, his phone pinged with an email notification from HOA Compliance Committee Compliance, Oakwood Heights, HOA.org, to Marcus Johnson, marcus.johnson@email.com. Subject, violation notice, waste receptacle placement. Dear Mr. Johnson, this notice is to inform you that your property at 1422 Sycamore Lane is currently in violation of the Oakwood Heights HOA Covenant, Section 8.3, regarding waste receptacle placement. Receptacles must not be placed curbside more than 12 hours prior to scheduled collection. As a new resident, this first violation will be recorded as a warning only. Please correct this issue immediately to avoid a formal citation and potential fine. Sincerely, Oakwood Heights HOA Compliance Committee. Marcus stared at the screen, then glanced out his window to see Diane standing at her mailbox, smartphone in hand, a satisfied expression on her face as she surveyed his trash bins. The battle lines, it seemed, had been drawn. He returned the bins to their designated storage area beside the garage, out of street view as required. Then he opened his laptop and created a new spreadsheet titled HOA Interactions, documenting the date, time, nature of the complaint, and covenant section cited. If Diane Keller wanted to play this game, he would make sure to keep score. May arrived with unexpected warmth, bringing early blooms to the gardens of Oakwood Heights and drawing residents outdoors after the relative seclusion of winter and early spring. Marcus had settled into a routine over the past 3 weeks. Weekdays, at the Oracle campus in Reston, weekends spent making his house a home and exploring the surrounding community. His backyard vegetable garden was taking shape within the strict HOA guidelines. 4 raised beds precisely arranged in a grid, each exactly 24 square feet, totaling 96 square feet of growing space. He'd planted tomatoes, bell peppers, zucchini, and herbs, their seedlings now pushing hopefully through the rich soil he'd enhanced with compost from a local garden center. It was Saturday morning, and Marcus knelt beside the beds, installing a drip irrigation system that would keep his plants watered during the hot Virginia summer ahead. The system was discreet, barely visible even when standing directly over the garden, well within covenant compliance. "You need a permit for that." The voice startled him. Marcus turned to find Diane Keller standing at the edge of his property, arms crossed over a powder blue cardigan despite the warmth of the day. Her gaze was fixed on the thin black tubing snaking between his vegetable beds. "Good morning, Diane," Marcus said, rising slowly and wiping soil from his hands onto his jeans. "A permit for a drip irrigation system?" "Section 10.4.2, Diane replied, without hesitation. "Any permanent irrigation system requires board approval. There's a form." Marcus took a deep breath, gathering his patience. "This isn't permanent. It's above ground and can be removed in minutes. I've read Section 10.4.2. It refers to in-ground sprinkler systems that require excavation." Diane's eyes narrowed slightly. "The intention of the rule applies to any system. That alters the property's water usage patterns. The spirit of the covenant is clear." "I believe you're mistaken," Marcus said evenly. "The spirit and letter of the covenant are quite specific about in-ground systems, but if you'd like to show me where above-ground drip irrigation is mentioned, I'd be happy to review it." A fleeting expression of surprise crossed Diane's features, quickly replaced by determination. "I'll have the committee review this at our next meeting. In the meantime, you might want to hold off on further installation." "I appreciate your concern," Marcus replied, "but I'll continue with my garden maintenance. If the committee finds an issue, they can notify me formally, and I'll address it then." Diane's lips pressed into a thin line. "You know, Mr. Johnson, things go much more smoothly in Oakwood Heights when residents cooperate with the HOA. I'm always happy to cooperate with reasonable interpretations of the covenant I agreed to when purchasing my home," Marcus said, maintaining his professional demeanor. "Enjoy your morning, Diane." He turned back to his garden, effectively dismissing her, though he remained acutely aware of her presence for several more moments before he heard the soft crunch of her footsteps retreating across his lawn. Once she was gone, Marcus documented the interaction in his growing spreadsheet, now containing 7 entries, all minor complaints about everything from the placement of his recycling bin to the Tesla being parked in his driveway rather than the garage. Overnight. Each time he had calmly cited the relevant covenant section that proved his compliance. Each time Diane had retreated, only to find another perceived violation days later. After finishing the irrigation installation, Marcus showered and changed into fresh clothes. He had invited a few colleagues from Oracle for a barbecue, his first real social gathering since moving in. The landscapers had come that morning, leaving his yard impeccable. His new gas grill gleamed on the patio. Inside, countertops held trays of prepared burger patties, vegetable skewers, and salads from the local market. At 3 o'clock, the first guests arrived, Rajiv and his wife Priya, who brought a bottle of wine and homemade samosas. Soon after came Jessica from the security protocols team, Derek from back-end development, and Taylor from project management, each contributing to the growing spread of food and drinks on the kitchen island. The gathering moved to the backyard, where Marcus fired up the grill, and soft music played from weather-resistant speakers mounted discreetly under the eaves. at a volume well within the HOA's specified decibel limitations for outdoor entertainment. "This place is gorgeous," Jessica commented, sipping a craft beer as she admired the garden. "Hard to believe you've only been here a month." "Thanks," Marcus replied, flipping burger patties with practiced ease. "It's coming together slowly." "How's the neighborhood?" Rajiv asked, settling into one of the Adirondack chairs Marcus had assembled the previous weekend. "Finding your way around?" "It's—" Marcus paused, considering his response. "It has its challenges." He gave them an abbreviated version of his ongoing issues with Diane and the HOA, keeping his tone light but not hiding his frustration. His colleagues listened with growing disbelief. "That's ridiculous," Derek said finally. "She's obviously targeting you." "Document everything," Taylor advised. "That's the only way to fight bureaucratic harassment." "Already on it," Marcus assured them. "I'm keeping records of every interaction, every email, every complaint." The conversation shifted to work matters and personal updates. By early evening, the gathering had taken on the relaxed quality of good food and better company, the tensions of HOA politics temporarily forgotten. The sun began its slow descent, casting golden light across the backyard as they cleared away paper plates and empty bottles. Marcus was describing his plans for a deck renovation when a sharp knock at the front door interrupted him. "Excuse me," he said, heading inside to answer it. A uniformed security officer stood on his porch, looking vaguely uncomfortable. "Good evening, sir. I'm Officer Reynolds with Oakwood Heights Security. We received a noise complaint about this address." Marcus blinked in surprise. "A noise complaint? We're just having a small barbecue with friends." "I understand, sir," Reynolds said, glancing past Marcus toward the backyard where conversation and laughter were clearly audible but hardly excessive. "But we have to follow up on all complaints. HOA regulations state that outdoor gatherings after 7 p.m. must maintain noise levels that cannot be heard from neighboring properties." Marcus checked his watch. 7:06 p.m. "Let me get this straight," Marcus said, his voice level but firm. "Someone complained about noise from a small gathering of 6 people at 7:06 p.m., when the covenant specifically mentions noise restrictions beginning at 7 p.m., and we've only exceeded that by 6 minutes? The security officer shifted uncomfortably. "I don't make the rules, sir. I'm just here to inform you of the complaint and ask that you keep the noise down." "Can I ask who made the complaint?" Marcus already knew the answer. "I'm not at liberty to say," Reynolds replied, though his quick glance toward Diane's house told Marcus everything he needed to know. "Just doing my job." "I understand," Marcus said. "We'll keep it down. Thank you for your time." After the officer left, Marcus returned to his guests, who had observed the interaction from the backyard. "Let me guess," Jessica said. "The neighbor?" Marcus nodded, his jaw tight with controlled frustration. "Diane Keller, HOA treasurer and self-appointed neighborhood surveillance system." "This is harassment," Taylor said firmly. "You need to take this to the HOA board." "Not yet," Marcus replied, lowering the volume on the outdoor speakers. "I'm building my case. When I make a formal complaint, I want it to be comprehensive and irrefutable." As his friends prepared to leave an hour later, Rajiv pulled Marcus aside. "My cousin's a civil rights attorney with the NACP Legal Defense Fund. Want me to put you in touch? This situation has discrimination written all over it." "Let's hold that card for now," Marcus said after a moment's consideration. "I want to handle this through proper channels first, but I appreciate having the option." After his guests departed, Marcus sat alone on his patio, the night air still warm as crickets began their evening chorus. He pulled out his phone and added the security visit to his documentation spreadsheet, including the exact time, the officer's name, and the trivial nature of the complaint. A movement caught his eye, Diane's silhouette at her upstairs window, watching his backyard. She didn't retreat when he noticed her, instead maintaining her surveillance with bold determination. Marcus raised his glass in a mock toast, then turned and went inside, refusing to give her the satisfaction of appearing bothered. In his home office, he opened his laptop and navigated to the HOA website, where meeting minutes were posted publicly. He began reading through the past year's records, looking for patterns of enforcement, names of other residents who had faced unusual scrutiny, potential allies on the board.